That move is wrong. William Hale felt the words before he understood them. His hand paused above the chessboard. Fingers still curved around the knight he had just moved. The pause was subtle, almost invisible, but it was real. For a man who prided himself on control, on never being caught off guard, the sensation was deeply unpleasant. He straightened slowly and lifted his head. "Who said that?" he asked. His voice was calm. Too calm, it carried across the patio without effort, the way a man spoke when he expected an answer. No one replied. Hale's eyes moved from face to face. Men he knew well. Men who had made fortunes and lost them. Men who laughed easily and spoke carefully around him. A few smiled uncertainly, assuming this was some private joke they had missed. Hale did not smile back. He knew the sound of disrespect when he heard it. What unsettled him was not the interruption, but the certainty in the voice. It had not been playful. It had not been mocking. It had been precise. "That move is wrong," the voice said again. This time, Hale turned fully toward it. A little girl stepped forward. She was small, slight, her dark hands clasped together as if she were holding herself in place. She could not have been more than 6. She stopped a few feet from the table and looked up at him. Not boldly, not defiantly, but directly. "That move is wrong," she repeated. The silence deepened. Hale stared at her, his mind briefly struggling to reconcile what he was seeing with what he was feeling. A child. A black child. The daughter of one of the household staff, he assumed. She was not supposed to exist in this moment. Not like this. Children hovered at the edges of his gatherings, quiet and invisible. They did not speak. They did not interrupt. They did not correct him. "I'm sorry," the girl added quickly, the words tumbling out now. "I didn't mean to interrupt." I-9. Hale did not respond right away. He was aware of the eyes on him, of the slight shift in posture among his guests. He felt something tighten in his chest, not anger, not yet, but a sharp, uncomfortable awareness. Humiliation had a way of arriving quietly, disguised as surprise. "You're saying I made a mistake," he said finally. The girl nodded. "Yes, sir." There it was, the thing he could not ignore. Hale glanced down at the board, then back at her. "And you felt comfortable announcing that," he said, carefully, in front of everyone. The girl hesitated. Her eyes flicked briefly to the side, toward where her mother stood frozen, one hand half raised as if she might reach out but did not dare. The girl swallowed. "I didn't think," she said. "It just came out." A few of the men shifted in their seats. One cleared his throat. Hale felt the heat rise in his face, subtle but undeniable. It was not the child who embarrassed him. It was the moment itself. The suggestion, however accidental, that he could be corrected by someone so small, so insignificant in the hierarchy he lived by. "Do you know how to play chess?" Hale asked. The question was not harsh. It was measured, almost polite. That, somehow, made it worse. The girl shook her head. "Not really, sir. Not really," Hale repeated. "Then why would you comment on my move?" She looked down at her hands. "I wasn't trying to comment," she said. "I just saw it. There is all together." Hale exhaled slowly through his nose. He could feel his guests watching him decide who he was going to be in this moment. The gracious host, the indulgent adult, or the man who did not tolerate being diminished, even accidentally. "You understand," he said, "that chess is not guesswork." "Yes, sir. It's study, discipline, experience." "Yes, sir. And yet," Hale continued, "you believe you saw something I did not." The girl hesitated again. Fear crept into her expression now, real and unmistakable. She had gone too far. She knew it. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly. "I'm not good at chess. I promise. I've seen a lot of games." Hale tilted his head slightly. "Seen," he repeated. "Or played." "Seen," she said. Mostly, there was no defiance in her voice. Only urgency. The desire to undo something already done. Hale felt the sting sharpen. It wasn't that she challenged him. It was that she did so without even realizing it. without ambition, without malice, as if his authority were so irrelevant to her, thinking that it never entered the equation at all. "That's quite an imagination," he said. "To think you can see errors without knowing the game." The girl's eyes filled, but she did not cry. She shook her head again. "I didn't say I could play," she said softly. "I just said the move was wrong." The words landed harder the second time. Hale straightened. The faint smiles around the table faded. He could feel the moment slipping towards something he did not like. Uncertain, unbalanced. "You've put me in an awkward position," he said, his tone still controlled. "Do you realize that?" The girl nodded, her chin trembling. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry." Her apology did not soothe him. It confirmed something he disliked even more. She understood exactly what she had done, and she had not done it out of disrespect. "Very well," Hale said after a pause. "Let's clear it up." He pulled the chair opposite him away from the table and turned it slightly, inviting and challenging at the same time. "Sit," he said. The girl's eyes widened. "No, sir, please. I don't want to." "Why not?" "Because I don't play chess," she said quickly. "And I don't want to make you angry." There it was. Not fear of losing, fear of consequence. Hale considered her. He could see the logic in her refusal. He could also see a way out for himself. "This doesn't have to be unpleasant," he said. "Think of it as a demonstration. If you're right, you'll show us. If you're wrong, we'll all move on." She shook her head again, more firmly this time. "I'm not good," she said. "I only spoke by accident." Hale felt the irritation sharpen into something colder. Being corrected was one thing. Being denied the chance to reassert control was another. "You corrected me," he said evenly. "That takes confidence. Or conviction. Either way, it deserves to be tested." The girl looked back at her mother. Panic clear now. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes pleading, but she did not speak. She knew better. Hale followed the girl's gaze, then looked back down at her. "If you lose," he said, "nothing happens. No one is upset. But if you win," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I'll increase your mother's pay." The girl froze. The patio seemed to hold its breath again, but this time it was different. This was no longer about pride. It was about need. She looked at her mother. Really looked. At the lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged after long days, the careful way she counted tips and wages. "I don't want to disrespect you," the girl said quietly to Hale. "I'm really not good." Hale nodded once, as if acknowledging her sincerity. "Then you have nothing to worry about." The girl stood there for a long moment. Then she took a small step forward. "I'll play," she said. Hale sat back down, folding his hands in front of him. His face was composed again, his authority restored, or so he believed. What he did not know was that the game had already moved beyond the board, and that the child standing across from him had seen the ending long before anyone else thought to look. William Hale remained seated after the girl agreed to play, his posture composed, his hands folded loosely in front of him. To anyone watching, he appeared calm, even gracious. Inside, however, something had shifted. The interruption, the correction, the refusal, each had landed like a small insult, manageable on its own but irritating in accumulation. He told himself this was simple. A brief demonstration, a reminder of order. "Bring her a chair," he said. One of the staff moved quickly, placing a cushioned chair opposite Hale's. It was too large for Annie. When she climbed onto it, her legs dangled several inches above the ground. She sat stiffly at the edge, back straight, hands resting in her lap the way her mother had taught her. She did not touch the pieces. Hale gestured to the board. "White or black?" Annie hesitated. The question startled her. She had never been asked to choose. In the games she played alone, the sides did not matter. The board was the board. "I don't mind," she said. Hale nodded, taking white without comment. He liked to move first. He liked control from the opening. He reached out and pushed his king's pawn forward 2 squares. "Standard," someone murmured approvingly. Annie watched the move. Her eyes followed the pawn, then lifted briefly to Hale's face before returning to the board. She did not rush. When she finally moved, she mirrored him, pushing her own pawn forward with careful fingers. Hale noticed the pause. He mistook it for hesitation. "You don't have to be nervous," he said, his tone almost kind. "This isn't an exam." "Yes, sir," Annie replied. The second move came quickly from Hale. A knight developed, clean and confident. He leaned back slightly, settling into the rhythm he knew well. Around them, conversation resumed in low tones. The tension had eased. This was becoming what it should have been all along, a man indulging a child, a harmless spectacle. Annie took longer this time. Her brow furrowed slightly. She moved a bishop, not aggressively, but with intent. Hale felt a flicker of irritation. It was not the best move, but it was not a mistake either. He pressed on, building his position, guiding the game toward familiar territory. He expected her to falter. Children always did. They saw patterns, yes, but they lacked patience. They overreached. They made obvious errors. Annie did not. She responded to each move with care. Sometimes she paused for a long time, her small fingers hovering above the board as if she were listening to something no one else could hear. Other times, she moved quickly, almost decisively. Hale began to feel a faint pressure in his chest, not concern, exactly, but awareness. He leaned forward again, elbows on the table. "You've seen chess before," he said, casually. "Yes, sir." "Where?" "Here," she said. "Mostly." Hale nodded, dismissing the answer. Of course, the games, the watching, children absorbed more than adults like to admit. That explained it. That was all. By the 10th move, the board looked uncomfortable. Not lost, not dangerous, just unfamiliar. Hale frowned slightly, scanning the pieces. Annie had not attacked him directly. Instead, she had closed off space, limited his options. It was subtle. He did not like subtle. "You're playing very defensively," he observed. Annie looked up at him, startled, as if she had forgotten he was there. "I'm sorry," she said. "Should I stop?" "No," Hale replied quickly. "Continue." He felt eyes on him again. He straightened, reminding himself who he was. This was still his house, his board, his game. He made a sharper move, pushing forward aggressively, creating pressure. It was a move designed to provoke a mistake. Annie's fingers tightened in her lap. For the first time, fear crossed her face clearly. She bit her lower lip, staring at the board. Her mother, standing a few feet away, clasped her hands together. She did not intervene. She could not. Annie lifted her hand, then pulled it back, lifted it again. Hale watched closely now, his irritation mingling with something else, curiosity, perhaps, or disbelief. Finally, Annie moved. She slid a piece into position that made no immediate sense to him. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. "That's an odd choice," someone whispered. Hale allowed himself a small smile. There it was, the mistake. He saw it clearly now. He reached out, ready to capitalize. Then he stopped. He leaned closer to the board, eyes narrowing. The line he had been preparing vanished the moment he traced it forward. He tried another. That path closed too. He sat back, frowning, and looked at the board again from the beginning. Annie watched him quietly. "Interesting," Hale said at last. It was the first time he had used that word about her. He adjusted his position, choosing a safer route, one that preserved his advantage. The game continued. The conversations around them faded completely now. No one was pretending anymore. This was no longer a novelty. Hale felt it then, the unfamiliar sensation of being pressed. Not beaten, not yet, but constrained. The board seemed smaller, his options fewer. He was reacting more than acting, something he despised. "How old are you?" he asked suddenly. "6, Annie replied. "And who taught you to play?" "No one," she said. "I just figured it out." Hale almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. He looked at her again, really looked. She was still sitting on the edge of the chair, feet swinging slightly, face serious now. She was no longer apologizing. She was thinking. "You said you weren't good," he said. "I'm not," Annie replied. I just don't like losing pieces. Hale's lips pressed together. The next few moves passed in silence. He made a trade he did not want to make, simply to relieve pressure. Annie accepted it without hesitation. Her position improved. His did not. He glanced at the guests. No one met his eyes. They were all watching the board. For the first time, Hale felt the sting of something close to embarrassment. Not because he might lose, he did not believe that yet, but because he was no longer certain. Certainty had always been his armor. Annie shifted in her chair, nervous again. I'm sorry, she said softly. Am I doing something wrong? No, Hale replied, more sharply than he intended. He caught himself and softened his tone. No, you're doing fine. Fine. The word tasted strange. He studied the board once more. Slower now, more cautious. The game had changed, and he could not quite say when. He only knew that the child across from him was no longer playing to survive. She was playing to finish, and somewhere deep inside, beneath pride and irritation and the need to maintain control, William Hale felt the first, unwelcome touch of doubt. If this moment made you feel something, pause for a second and let us know. Like this video, comment where you are watching from, and share your thoughts. And if stories about truth, justice, and quiet courage matter to you, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next one. William Hale had lost track of time. He noticed it only when his glass of wine, poured nearly full at the beginning of the game, sat untouched beside the board, the surface dull now, warming under the sun. The realization irritated him more than it should have. He did not like being absorbed without permission. He did not like anything that pulled him out of command. Across from him, Annie shifted slightly on the chair. Her feet swung once, then stilled. She was aware of the weight of the moment now. Not because she was winning, she did not think in those terms, but because the air had changed. The adults were quiet in a way she recognized. It was the same quiet that fell over a room when her mother opened a bill she could not yet pay. Hale studied the board again. The pieces had arranged themselves into something unfamiliar. Not chaotic. Not reckless. Structured. Intentional. The kind of position that did not shout danger but promised it later. Patiently. Hale disliked delayed consequences. He preferred clean outcomes. Immediate results. You're very calm, he said. Annie looked up. I am? Yes, he said. Most children rush. They want to see something happen. She thought about that. Things are happening, she said. Just not loud ones. The answer unsettled him. Not because it was clever, but because it was sincere. Hale made his move. A careful one. He chose safety over ambition, retreating a piece he would normally advance. It felt like yielding ground, and the sensation irritated him deeply. Annie responded almost immediately. The speed caught his attention. She had not been waiting for his move. She had been expecting it. Hale leaned back slightly, then forward again, elbows resting on the table. His eyes scanned the board, then lifted to her face. He noticed the way her gaze moved, not darting, not nervous, but purposeful. When she looked at the board, it was as if she were remembering something already known. Who do you play with? He asked. Annie shook her head. No one. Ever? No, sir. You said you play by yourself. Yes, sir. Hale frowned. And who wins? Annie hesitated. It depends, she said. Sometimes I make the black pieces smarter, sometimes the white ones. A few of the men exchanged glances. Hale ignored them. His focus had narrowed to the girl and the board between them. That's not how chess works, he said. Annie tilted her head. It is, if you're learning, she replied, then quickly added, I think. Hale felt something twist inside him. Not anger. Something closer to irritation mixed with unwilling admiration. He pushed it aside. He made another move, sharper this time, forcing an exchange. Annie accepted it without hesitation. The pieces came off the board one by one. Hale felt a small sense of relief. Simplification favored experience, favored him. But as the board cleared, a new discomfort emerged. Space. Annie's remaining pieces seemed to breathe easier. They occupied key squares without crowding, supporting one another in quiet ways. Hale found himself counting moves further ahead than he normally would. 5, 6, 7. Each line ended in something unsatisfying. He frowned. "You're protecting that pawn," he said. "Yes, sir." "Why?" Annie looked surprised. "Because if you take it, you lose the rook." Hale blinked. He followed the line again, slower this time. She was right. Not immediately, not obviously, but inevitably. He sat back, the chair creaking softly beneath him. Around them, the world had narrowed. No one spoke. No glasses clinked. No phones buzzed. The game had claimed the space entirely. Hale was suddenly very aware of the fact that he was being watched, not admired, evaluated. Annie shifted again, her fingers curling into the fabric of her dress. "I'm sorry," she said. "If you want me to stop." "No," Hale said quickly. Too quickly. He took a breath and softened his tone. "No. Keep going." She nodded and returned her attention to the board. The next few moves passed in silence. Hale played conservatively now, testing, probing. Annie responded with restraint. She did not chase advantages. She did not gloat. She simply adjusted, piece by piece, as if guided by an internal logic Hale could not see. "You don't seem afraid anymore," he observed. Annie paused. "I am," she said. "Just not of the board." "Of what then?" She thought for a moment. "Of doing something wrong," she said. "Of making my mom worried." Hale followed her gaze briefly to where her mother stood, rigid and pale, hands clasped together as if in prayer. The woman did not look away when Hale glanced at her. She met his eyes for a moment, then lowered her gaze. Hale felt an unexpected pinch of discomfort. He dismissed it. "You understand," he said, "that this is just a game." "Oh," Annie nodded. "Yes, sir." "And yet," Hale continued, "you're taking it very seriously." "Yes, sir." "Why?" she answered without hesitation. "Because you are." The words landed softly, but they struck with precision. Hale's jaw tightened. He looked back at the board, at the position unfolding beneath his hands. He had played dozens of games here, hundreds perhaps, always from a position of leisure. Chess had been something to enjoy, something to win casually, something that affirmed what he already believed about himself. This game was different. He made a move that surprised even him. An aggressive thrust, sacrificing structure for initiative. It was a statement, a refusal to be slowly contained. Annie stared at the board, her eyes widening slightly. For the first time, she did not move right away. Hale watched her carefully now. He saw the fear return, faint but real. He saw her lips pressed together, her breathing slow. He felt a flicker of satisfaction. There. That was more like it. Minutes passed. Finally, Annie lifted her hand. Then she lowered it. Then she lifted it again. "I might be wrong," she said quietly. Hale said nothing. "But if I don't move this," she continued, "then everything else stops working." She slid her piece forward. The move was quiet, unassuming. Hale stared at it. Then he leaned in, eyes narrowing, tracing lines again. His aggressive thrust stalled. His initiative dissolved. The sacrifice he had made now looked unnecessary. Worse, it looked foolish. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Hale sat back. For the first time since the game began, his heart beat a little faster. He looked at Annie, really looked at her, and saw not a child playing a game, but a mind operating at a level he had not anticipated. Not mimicking, not reacting, creating. "This position," he said slowly. "Where did you learn it?" Annie shrugged. "I didn't." Hale's fingers curled against the arm of his chair. "You didn't learn it," he repeated. "No, sir." "Then how did you find it?" She hesitated. Then she said, almost apologetically, "It was already there." Something in Hale's expression shifted. The irritation, the pride, the sense of control, they wavered. Just slightly. He was no longer certain what lesson this game was meant to teach, or who it was meant for. He looked down at the board again. The path ahead was narrowing, and for the first time, William Hale understood that he was no longer guiding the game. He was following it. William Hale stared at the board longer than he intended. He was aware of the silence pressing in around him, of the way the men standing nearby had stopped pretending this was entertainment. No one spoke now. No one shifted. The game had crossed an invisible line, and everyone felt it, even if they could not explain why. Hale cleared his throat. "You're setting traps," he said. Annie looked up at him. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she were surprised by the word. "I don't think so," she said carefully. "I'm just trying to make sure things don't fall apart." Hale almost laughed. Almost. The phrase lingered with him longer than it should have. Things don't fall apart. That was not how he thought about chess, or business, or life. He believed in pressure, in forcing outcomes, in bending situations until they broke the right way. He leaned forward again and studied the board. The position was uncomfortable now, undeniably so. Not losing, at least not yet, but rigid. Constrained. Every aggressive idea he considered ran into resistance 2 or 3 moves later. Annie's pieces were not attacking him directly. They were simply waiting, occupying space, limiting him. "You realize," he said, "that you're playing very cautiously." Annie nodded. "Yes, sir." "Why?" She considered the question. "Because if I hurry," she said, "I miss things." Hale's jaw tightened. He made his move anyway, pushing a pawn forward to challenge her structure. It was a reasonable decision. Solid. The kind of move that reminded the board who was in charge. Annie responded by exchanging pieces. Hale frowned. He had expected resistance, not acceptance. The trade simplified the position further, but not in his favor. He felt the faint irritation sharpen again. "You don't seem attached to your pieces," he said. She shrugged. "They all do jobs," she replied. "If one job is finished, it's okay if it leaves." The words were simple. Too simple. Hale found himself thinking about them anyway. He glanced briefly at her mother again. The woman had not moved. Her face was drawn tight, eyes fixed on Annie with a mixture of pride and fear. Hale recognized that look. He had seen it in employees who were good at their work but afraid of being noticed for it. He looked back at the board. Hale made another move, probing, testing. Annie countered smoothly. Again, she did not rush. Again, she did not hesitate for long. The rhythm of the game had settled into something steady, almost meditative. "How often do you play?" Hale asked. "Every day," Annie said. "With whom?" "With the board," she replied. He frowned. "That's not an answer." "It is to me," she said, then quickly added, "Sir." Hale leaned back, studying her face. There was no arrogance there, no sense of performance. She was not trying to impress him or anyone else. She was simply answering questions. "You don't watch television?" he asked. "No, sir." "Video games?" She shook her head. "Books?" "Yes," she said. "Sometimes." "What kind?" "Ones with puzzles," Annie said. "And maps." Hale nodded slowly. He made another move, a defensive one this time. The realization annoyed him. He was playing not to lose ground, not to win. He did not like that feeling. The onlookers had drawn closer without realizing it. A few stood directly behind Hale now, peering over his shoulder. He felt their presence like weight. Annie noticed it too. She shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to make you lose," she said suddenly. Hale looked up. "What?" "I don't want you to feel bad," she continued. "We can stop if you want." The offer hit him harder than any taunt could have. "You think I feel bad?" he asked. Annie hesitated. "I think you don't like surprises." "Well," a ripple of quiet laughter moved through the group, quickly stifled. Hale raised a hand without turning around, and the sound died immediately. "I don't like being corrected," he said evenly. Annie nodded. "My mom doesn't either." The simplicity of the comparison unsettled him. He turned back to the board, jaw tight. He played faster now. Not recklessly, but with a hint of impatience. Annie noticed immediately. She slowed down, matching his speed with stillness. The contrast was stark. Hale attacked on the king side, committing to a plan at last. It was ambitious, risky, the kind of move that demanded a response. Annie stared at the board, longer than she had at any point in the game. Her brow furrowed, her hands clenched in her lap. Hale felt a flicker of satisfaction. There, he thought. That's the pressure. Minutes passed. The sun shifted slightly overhead. Annie's feet stopped swinging. Finally, she looked up at him. "Can I ask a question?" she said. Hale nodded. "Go ahead. Why do you want to win so much?" The question was not accusatory. It was curious. That somehow made it worse. Hale opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had answers, many of them, but none that felt appropriate to say aloud. "Not here. Not to her. Because winning matters," he said finally. Annie considered that. "Does losing always mean you're wrong?" The question landed quietly and refused to leave. Hale looked at the board again, then back at her. He realized, suddenly, that she was not playing to humiliate him. She was not playing to prove anything. She was playing because the game made sense to her, and because he had asked her to. He exhaled and made his move. Annie responded immediately. The response was precise, calm, and deeply inconvenient. Hale leaned in, heart beating faster now. He traced the line forward, then another. Each one ended the same way. His attack stalled. Worse, it exposed weaknesses he could not easily fix. He sat back slowly. Someone behind him whispered, "Careful." Hale ignored them. "You saw that coming," he said to Annie. "Yes, sir." "How many moves?" She shrugged. 3, maybe 4. Hale felt the room tilt slightly. He had seen it one move ahead. At best, the gap between them widened in his mind, no longer deniable. "You really don't think you're good at chess," he said. Annie shook her head. "I think chess is good," she said. "I just listen." Hale looked down at the board again. For the first time, the possibility he had refused to acknowledge took shape clearly in his mind. He might not be playing a child who had been lucky. He might be playing a child who understood something he did not. And that realization, more than the position on the board, made his hands feel suddenly unsteady. William Hale had always believed that composure was a form of strength. It was what separated men like him from men who reacted too quickly, spoke too loudly, revealed too much. Sitting across from Annie now, he drew on that belief deliberately. He straightened his back, adjusted his cufflinks, and forced his breathing into a steady rhythm. Whatever this game had become, he would not allow it to turn him into something smaller. "Let's slow this down," he said. Annie looked up at him, uncertain. "Okay." Hale studied the board carefully.
Let's slow this down.
The position was tense, but not yet decisive. That mattered. He reminded himself of something else as well. She was 6 years old. No matter how unusual her instincts might be, no child could maintain focus forever. Fatigue would come. Mistakes would follow. He made a quiet move, one designed not to threaten but to wait. Annie noticed immediately. She frowned, then glanced up at him. "Are we resting?" The question startled a few soft chuckles from the onlookers. Hale ignored them. "No," he said evenly. "We're thinking." Annie nodded and returned her attention to the board. She mirrored his patience, choosing a move that did not advance her position, but did not weaken it either. The symmetry irritated him. He did not like reflections. He liked dominance. "How long can you sit still?" Hale asked suddenly. Annie blinked. "I don't know," she said. "A long time, I think." "We know Dak did." He watched her hands. They were small, but steady. No tapping, no fidgeting. Only when she waited did she rock slightly, back and forth. A motion so subtle, it almost escaped notice. "You're not bored," he said. "No, sir." "Why not?" She considered this seriously. "Because the board is still talking." The phrase sent a quiet ripple through the group. Hale felt irritation stir again, but he pushed it down. He would not rise to poetry. "You keep saying things like that," he said. "What does that mean?" Annie shrugged. "It means if I stop listening, I make mistakes." Hale exhaled slowly. He made another move, careful and deliberate. He was drawing the game toward an endgame now, a phase he trusted. Fewer pieces, fewer surprises. Annie accepted the transition without resistance. As the board simplified, Hale felt a measure of relief. This was where experience mattered. where instincts gave way to calculation, where children faltered, but Annie did not falter. She adjusted with ease, repositioning her king earlier than expected, activating pieces Hale had assumed were passive. Her timing was impeccable. Not fast, not slow, exact. "You've done this before," Hale said. Annie shook her head. "Not like this." "What do you mean?" She glanced around, suddenly aware of the crowd again. With people watching, Hale followed her gaze. He saw what she saw now. Men in expensive jackets, faces tight with concentration, eyes darting between the board and her. He saw how small she must feel under that attention. "You don't have to continue," he said, surprising himself. "We can call it a draw." Annie looked back at him. "Is that when nobody wins?" "Yes," she frowned. "But someone always wins," she said, "even if it's quiet." Hale's lips pressed together. "You're very certain about that," he said. She nodded. "My mom says quiet wins last longer." Hale glanced again toward her mother. The woman stood as she had since the beginning, her posture rigid, her face pale. Hale wondered how many quiet wins she had endured in her life, how many losses disguised as survival. He returned his attention to the board. Hale made a move designed to test Annie's understanding, a subtle shift that threatened nothing immediately but promised advantage later. He watched her closely, waiting for the hesitation, the uncertainty. It did not come. Annie responded with a move that neutralized his idea completely. Hale froze. He leaned forward, scanning the board, then sat back again. He checked the line once more. She had seen it. Not guessed. Seen. A murmur moved through the group. This time, Hale did not silence it. "You didn't just react," he said quietly. "You anticipated." Annie nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. It was going to happen anyway. Hale felt something shift again, a realization pressing at the edges of his certainty. "You understand," he said, "that most people spend years learning to do that." "Yes, sir." "And you say no one taught you?" "Yes, sir." He studied her face, searching for arrogance, for performance, for the pleasure of being right. He found none. What he saw instead unsettled him more deeply. Responsibility. As if she believed she owed the board her best attention, simply because it existed. The game moved on. Hale made another attempt to assert control, trading pieces in a way that should have equalized the position. Annie accepted. But in doing so, she improved her king's activity further. The board tilted, almost imperceptibly, but enough for Hale to feel it in his chest. He was being outplayed, not crushed, not humiliated, guided. "You're not trying to trap me," he said slowly. Annie shook her head. "No, sir." "Then what are you trying to do?" She thought for a moment. "Finish," she said. The simplicity of the answer was devastating. Hale sat back, hands resting on the arms of his chair. For the first time since the game began, he felt the weight of the bet he had made. Not the money, the moment, the witnesses, the meaning that had attached itself to this board without his consent. He looked at Annie again. "Do you know what happens if you win?" he asked. She nodded. "My mom gets more money. And anything else?" She hesitated. "I don't know." Hale realized then that she was not thinking beyond the board. Not about pride. Not about consequence. Only about what was in front of her. That clarity frightened him. He leaned forward and made his move. Annie responded immediately. The move was quiet, efficient, and it closed the last path Hale had been hoping to keep open. He stared at the board, pulse quickening. The end was no longer theoretical. It was approaching. William Hale did not move for several seconds. The board lay between them, quiet and undeniable. The pieces had thinned to an arrangement that allowed no hiding places, no distractions, no unnecessary force. Hale understood this phase of the game well enough to know what it meant when options disappeared one by one. It meant the end was no longer a matter of imagination. It was a matter of time. He inhaled slowly, then exhaled through his nose. "You've simplified everything," he said. Annie nodded. "It's easier to see this way." Hale studied her face. She was no longer apologizing. She was no longer shrinking. She was not smiling either. Her expression held a kind of seriousness he associated with people much older than 6 people who had learned early that attention was a responsibility, not a reward. You understand, Hale said, that endgames are about precision. Yes, sir. And mistakes, he continued, are punished. I numb. Annie's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. I know. Hale made his move. It was the best he had. A king maneuver designed to contest space, to force activity. As soon as his hand left the piece, he knew it was not enough. But knowing and admitting were different things. Annie leaned forward. Her eyes traced the board in silence. She did not rush. She did not hesitate for long either. When she moved, it was decisive. Hale felt his stomach tighten. That closes it, he said quietly. Annie looked up at him, alarmed. Did I do something wrong? No, Hale replied. You did exactly what you should have done. The words surprised both of them. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on the board. For the first time since the game began, he allowed himself to think not as a host, not as a man managing appearances, but as a player facing reality. You've taken away my counterplay, he said. I can't attack. I can't wait. I can only respond. Ajay. Annie nodded, relief flickering across her face. That's what I was hoping. Hale almost laughed. Almost. Around them, the guests had grown utterly still. No one pretended anymore. This was not a child amusing a room. This was something else. Something rarer. Hale made another move, slower this time. Annie responded immediately. The sound of the piece settling into place felt louder than it should have. Hale stared at the board again, then closed his eyes briefly. He opened them and looked at her. How did you see this? He asked. Annie hesitated. She searched for the right words. It's like cleaning, she said finally. If you don't do it in the right order, it takes longer, and you miss spots. Hale absorbed that in silence. You're talking about structure, he said. Yes, Annie replied, but also patience. Hale nodded slowly. The concept was not foreign to him. He had built companies on patience, on long-term thinking, and yet, here, he had failed to apply it. He had underestimated the board. And her. He looked down again. The next few moves were forced. Hale knew it. Annie knew it. The inevitability pressed in on him, uncomfortable and unmistakable. He had always believed that losing was something that happened to other people, careless people, impatient people. He had built his life on avoiding it. He felt the eyes on him again, not judging, waiting. Hale moved. Annie responded. Check, she said softly. The word landed with quiet authority. Hale stared at the position. He scanned every square, every possibility. He saw none that saved him. His king was boxed in, not by brute force, but by absence of options. He sat back. For a long moment, no one spoke. Hale's chest felt tight, not with anger, not with humiliation, but with something far more unsettling. Recognition. You didn't rush me, he said. You didn't try to beat me quickly. Annie shook her head. That would have been scary, she said. For me. And instead, Hale continued, you waited. Yes, sir. You let me move myself into this. Annie looked down. I didn't mean to. I know, Hale said. That, more than anything else, was what unsettled him. He looked at the board one last time. There was no escape. Hale reached out and tipped his king onto its side. The sound was soft, final. A collective breath released around the patio. Hale sat back, his hand still resting near the fallen piece. He did not look at the guests. He did not look at Annie right away either. He stared at the board, at the quiet order of it, at the clarity that had been revealed against his will. Then he looked at her. You won, he said. Annie's eyes widened. I did? Yes. She glanced toward her mother, disbelief and hope colliding on her face. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled, unchecked. Hale watched the exchange in silence. He stood. The movement drew everyone's attention immediately. Annie stiffened, fear flashing across her face again. She slid off the chair, instinctively bracing for consequence. Hale noticed. Stay, he said gently. The word surprised him as much as it surprised her. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen. "I'll keep my word," he said, his voice steady. "Your mother's pay will be increased, effective immediately, when we just, Annie nodded, overwhelmed. "Thank you, sir." Hale inclined his head. "You earned it." He looked around at his guests now, at their expressions, at the quiet respect that had replaced amusement. "This game is over," he said. "But I think we all learned something." No one disagreed. Annie took her mother's hand. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply held on, as if grounding herself in something real. Hale watched her for a moment longer. Then he looked back at the board, at the fallen king, and understood something he had not expected to learn that day. Losing did not feel like humiliation. It felt like clarity. William Hale dismissed his guests earlier than usual. He did it politely, with practiced ease, thanking them for coming, promising another gathering soon. They left in small groups, voices low, glancing back more than once toward Annie and her mother, as if trying to understand what they had just witnessed. No one laughed now. No one made jokes. The afternoon had ended with something heavier than entertainment, and everyone felt it. When the courtyard finally emptied, the space felt strangely exposed. Annie stood beside her mother near the edge of the patio, fingers wrapped tightly around her mother's hand. The adrenaline that had carried her through the game was fading, replaced by a familiar uncertainty. She had won, she knew that much. But winning, she was learning, did not always feel safe. Hale watched them for a moment from across the board. "You can relax," he said. "No one is in trouble." "A gover." Annie nodded, though her shoulders remained tense. Her mother stepped forward slightly, careful and respectful. "Sir," she said, her voice unsteady, "thank you for your generosity." Annie didn't mean to cause. She didn't cause anything. Hale interrupted gently. The word gently surprised them both. Hale cleared his throat. "Your daughter corrected my move," he continued. "Then she beat me. Those are facts. I don't punish facts." Annie looked up at him then. "I didn't want to make you lose," she said quietly. Hale met her gaze. He saw sincerity there. And something else, responsibility, again, as if she felt accountable not just for her actions, but for his feelings as well. "You didn't make me lose," he said. "I lost." The distinction mattered. He gestured toward the table. "Do you know how many times I've played chess here?" Annie shook her head. "Hundreds," Hale said. "Maybe more." He paused. "No one has ever spoken during a game the way you did." Annie's stomach tightened. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. Hale shook his head. "Don't apologize for being right." The words landed awkwardly, as if he were not accustomed to saying them. He looked at her mother again. "How long has she been playing?" Her mother hesitated. "She started moving the pieces when she was 4, she said. "At first, I thought she was just copying. Then she started correcting me." Annie flushed. "Only sometimes." Her mother smiled faintly. "She taught herself. We don't have much. No lessons. No books. Until the library card." Hale listened closely. "And you never thought to tell anyone?" he asked. Her mother lowered her eyes. "I didn't think anyone would care." The honesty of the answer settled heavily between them. Hale nodded once. "Most people wouldn't," he said. "That doesn't make you wrong." He turned back to Annie. "Do you know what you did out there today?" She frowned. "Played chess?" Hale allowed himself a small smile. "Yes. But also something else." He paused, choosing his words carefully. He was not used to explaining things to children. Or perhaps he was simply not used to explaining them at all. "You challenged the way this room works," he said, without trying to. Annie blinked. "I didn't mean to." "I know," Hale replied. "That's what makes it dangerous." Her eyes widened. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Hale said firmly. "You're unusual." Is Annie wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Hale walked slowly around the table, then stopped in front of her. He crouched slightly, lowering himself closer to her eye level. The movement felt unfamiliar, but necessary. "Annie," he said, "do you like chess?" She nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." "Why?" She thought about it. "Because it's fair," she said. The board doesn't care who you are. Hale felt the truth of that settle into him more deeply than he expected. You're right, he said. People care. Boards don't. He straightened and looked back at the table one last time. The pieces were still arranged in their final positions, the fallen king lying on its side, a quiet monument. I want to ask you something, he said. Annie stiffened again. Okay. Would you like to play again sometime? Hale asked. Not like this, not for a crowd. Annie hesitated. She glanced at her mother, who looked just as uncertain. Just to learn, Hale added, on both sides. 8. Annie considered this. I don't know all the rules, she said. Sometimes I make them up. Hale nodded. So do most people, he said. They just don't admit it. She smiled, just a little. I would like that, Annie said finally, as long as my mom is here. Hale inclined his head. Of course. A quiet settled over them, different from before. Not tense. Reflective. I should go clean the board, Annie said after a moment, instinct reasserting itself. Hale stopped her with a raised hand. Leave it, he said. For today. She looked at the pieces, uncertain. But it's messy. Yes, Hale replied, and that's all right. Annie nodded, accepting the answer even if she didn't fully understand it. As she and her mother turned to leave, Hale watched them go. He felt something unfamiliar tug at him, not regret. Exactly, but awareness, a sense that something small had shifted in a way that would not easily shift back. Before they reached the edge of the courtyard, he spoke again. Annie, she turned. You didn't just win a game today, he said. You reminded me of something I forgot. What? She asked. Hale considered the question, then answered honestly. That being right doesn't always belong to the loudest person in the room. Annie nodded solemnly, as if filing the thought away for later. She took her mother's hand, and together they walked on. Hale remained where he was long after they were gone, staring at the empty chair across from him. The board had been cleared of people, but the lesson remained. The following week passed quietly. For Annie, quiet meant returning to routines that felt smaller now. She went back to standing beside her mother while dishes clinked and tables were wiped clean. She went back to watching adults speak over her head, their voices carrying confidence she was not invited to share. But something inside her had shifted. The board still lived in her mind, the way it always had. But now it carried a memory attached to it, one where she had been seen. For William Hale, quiet was unfamiliar. He noticed it the first morning after the game, standing alone in his kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hand. He replayed positions in his head without intending to. Lines he had missed, choices he had made too quickly. It annoyed him at first, then it intrigued him. Then, slowly, it unsettled him. He had lost before. That was not the problem. The problem was that he had lost to someone who had nothing to gain from his defeat except fairness. On Saturday morning, Hale found himself walking toward the courtyard earlier than usual. The board had been set up again, as it always was, but the chairs remained empty. No guests yet. No wine poured. The pieces sat untouched, orderly, expectant. He stood there for a long moment, hands clasped behind his back. You're early, a voice said. Hale turned. Annie's mother stood a few steps away, holding a small bag of cleaning supplies. Annie was beside her, hair neatly braided, dress simple and clean. She froze when she saw Hale, instinctively stepping closer to her mother. Yes, Hale said. So are you. Annie's mother smiled politely. I didn't know if you'd want the board ready. Hale shook his head. Leave it as it is. Annie glanced at the pieces, then quickly looked away. She remembered what he had said last time. Leave it. Hale studied her quietly. She looked different outside the intensity of the game, smaller, younger, more cautious. The weight she had carried at the table was gone, replaced by something fragile. Annie, he said. She looked up, eyes alert. Yes, sir. Do you remember what I asked you last time? She nodded. You asked if I wanted to play again. And I said yes, she replied, then added quickly. If my mom stayed, she will, Hale said. Annie's shoulders relaxed slightly. Hale gestured toward the table. No audience today, he said. No wager. Just the board. Annie hesitated. She looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead," her mother said softly. "I'll be right here." Annie walked to the chair, climbing up carefully. This time, Hale waited until she was settled before sitting himself. He did not take White immediately. Instead, he looked at her. "Which side do you want?" he asked. Annie blinked, surprised. "I can choose?" "Yes, is today." She studied the board for a moment. "Black," she said. Hale nodded and took White again. But this time the choice felt different. Less automatic, less assured. They began. The opening unfolded more slowly than before. Hale played deliberately, testing ideas rather than asserting them. Annie responded with the same quiet confidence he had come to recognize. But there was a difference too. She was more cautious now, less fluid, as if something weighed on her. "You're thinking too much," Hale said gently. Annie looked up, startled. "I am?" "Yes," he replied. "Last time, you trusted yourself." She frowned. "Last time, I was scared. And now, I don't want to do it wrong." Hale paused, his hand hovering above the board. The statement landed heavier than he expected. "Do you know," he said slowly, "how many people stop being good at things because they're afraid of doing them wrong?" Annie shook her head. "Most," Hale said. She thought about that, then nodded as if it made sense. He made his move. Annie responded, more slowly now, but with intention. The rhythm returned, tentative at first, then steadier. Hale watched closely, noticing details he had ignored before. The way she tilted her head when calculating, the way she exhaled before committing to a move, the faint tapping of her thumb against the chair when something felt uncertain. "You see patterns," he said. "Yes," Annie replied, "but sometimes I don't know what they mean." "That's all right," Hale said. "Neither do most adults." She smiled faintly at that. The game progressed without drama. No gasps, no murmurs. Just two minds working quietly across 64 squares. Hale found himself enjoying it in a way he had not expected. There was no performance here. No need to win quickly. Only understanding. "Why did you say chess was fair?" Hale asked after a while. Annie paused before moving. "Because it doesn't care who your parents are," she said, "or how old you are, or if you're quiet." Hale absorbed that. He made a mistake. Not a dramatic one, just a small inaccuracy. Annie noticed immediately, but she did not speak this time. She simply adjusted her play, gently increasing pressure. Hale smiled. "You saw that," he said. Annie nodded. "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you say anything?" She shrugged. "You didn't ask." The answer pleased him more than he cared to admit. The game ended in a draw. They both saw it coming several moves before it happened. Hale could have forced something. Annie could have pushed harder. Neither did. When they shook hands, the gesture felt less ceremonial and more sincere. "That was good," Hale said. Annie nodded. "Yes, sir. You're learning restraint," he added. She frowned. "Is that good?" "Very," Hale replied. "Especially for someone who sees so much." Her mother approached then, careful not to interrupt too sharply. "Annie," she said, "it's time to finish up." Annie slid off the chair, glancing once more at the board. "Thank you," she said to Hale. "For what?" "For listening," Annie replied. Hale watched her walk away, her steps lighter than before. He remained seated for a long moment after they left, staring at the board. For the first time in years, he felt something rare and valuable stirring beneath his ambition. Respect. By the third Saturday, the routine had settled into something quietly predictable. Annie arrived with her mother just before noon. Hale was already there, standing near the board, sleeves rolled up, jacket nowhere in sight. The formality that once defined his weekends had softened, replaced by something closer to intention. He nodded when he saw them, a small acknowledgement that carried more meaning than any greeting. "You're early," Annie said, climbing onto the chair without being asked. "So are you," Hale replied. Her mother lingered at a respectful distance, pretending to organize supplies while watching closely. She trusted this place more than she had before, but trust, she knew, was something that grew slowly, or not at all. They began without ceremony. Hale played white again, but this time, the opening was unfamiliar, quiet, flexible, designed to invite response rather than impose control. Annie noticed immediately. She did not mirror him. She chose her own path, one that curved away from his expectations. "You're experimenting," Annie said. "Yes," Hale replied. "Are you?" She considered. "I think so." The board filled with tension that felt different from the first game they had played. Less dramatic, more thoughtful. Hale was no longer trying to test her. Annie was no longer trying to survive him. They were learning each other's rhythms now, where impatience lived, where confidence turned brittle. Halfway through the opening, Annie paused longer than usual. "What is it?" Hale asked. She pointed, not touching the piece. "There," she said. "If I move that, something bad happens later." Hale followed her line. "Yes," he said. "But if you don't move it, something bad happens sooner." Annie frowned. "Then which is better?" Hale smiled slightly. "That," he said, "depends on what you're willing to accept." She sat back, thinking. "I don't like bad things later," she said finally. "They surprise you." Hale nodded. "Most people feel that way." She moved. The choice was conservative, protective. Hale respected it even as he adjusted his own plan. He felt something unfamiliar then, not the satisfaction of control, but the pleasure of conversation. Each move was a sentence, each pause, a question. "You don't tell me what to do anymore," Annie observed. "No," Hale agreed. "I tell you what I see." "Why?" "Because," he said, "you don't need permission to think. It is out." The words settled into her quietly. She nodded and returned her attention to the board. The game deepened. Annie made a small mistake. Not catastrophic, but real. Hale saw it immediately. He also saw the way her shoulders tightened, the way her breath caught as soon as the piece left her fingers. She knew Hale did not exploit it right away. Instead, he made a move that maintained pressure without punishing her. It was a choice, one he was conscious of. Annie looked up at him. "You could have taken that." "Yes," Hale said. "Why didn't you?" He considered the question. "Because," he said slowly, "I wanted to see what you'd do next." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Not suspicious, curious. Is that fair?" she asked. "That depends," Hale replied, "on whether you think fairness means winning at all costs." She thought about that for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." She corrected the mistake herself 2 moves later, cleverly, quietly. Hale smiled, this time without restraint. "Well done," he said. Her face lit briefly. Then she caught herself, glancing toward her mother as if checking whether it was safe to be pleased. Hale noticed. "You don't have to hide that," he said gently. Annie shrugged. "It's easier." Hale understood more than he liked. As the game approached its middle phase, footsteps echoed faintly from the far side of the courtyard. 2 men entered, friends of Hale's, arriving early, voices already rising with casual laughter. They stopped when they saw the board, the child, the stillness. Hale did not look up. Annie did. Her hands stilled. The confidence she had been building faltered, just slightly. "It's okay," Hale said without turning. "They can wait." The men hesitated, surprised. One of them opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again when Hale raised a hand. "Later," Hale said calmly. They withdrew, murmuring among themselves. Annie exhaled. "Does that bother you?" she asked. "What?" "That they had to wait." Hale shook his head. "No. Why not?" "Because this matters more," he said. She studied his face, searching for irony. Finding none, she nodded and returned to the board. They played on. The endgame approached gradually, neither rushing. This time, Hale saw the draw forming before Annie did. He waited, letting her find it herself. When she did, her eyes widened with quiet satisfaction. "Oh," she said, "it's even." "Yes," Hale replied. They reached it together, naturally, without forcing the result. When the final move was played, neither spoke for a moment. "That was different," Annie said at last. "Yes," Hale agreed. "It was. Better?" she asked. Hale considered the question carefully. "More honest," he said. She accepted that. Her mother approached, smiling now, a softness in her expression that had not been there before. "Annie," she said. "It's time." Annie slid down from the chair, then hesitated. She looked back at Hale. "Will we play again?" she asked. Hale nodded. "As long as you want to." She smiled, small but genuine. "I do." As they walked away, Hale remained seated, hands resting on the table, eyes on the board. He thought about the men he had turned away, about the ease with which he had done it, about how little power mattered when compared to clarity. For the first time in a long while, he felt himself learning not about chess, but about attention, about what deserved it, and about how easily it could be wasted. The fourth Saturday did not begin at the board. It began in the kitchen. Annie sat at the small table near the window, swinging her legs while her mother packed lunches into brown paper bags. The radio hummed softly in the background, a familiar voice talking about traffic and weather. It was an ordinary morning, but Annie felt different inside it. The week had been long, filled with schoolwork that moved too slowly, and questions she did not ask out loud. Chess positions drifted through her thoughts while she brushed her teeth, while she waited for the bus, while she lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling. "You're thinking again," her mother said gently, folding the top of a bag. Annie looked up. "I always think," her mother smiled. "You think louder lately." Annie considered that. "Is that bad?" "No," her mother said. "Just new." They walked to the estate together, the same path they always took. Annie noticed details she had ignored before. The way the gravel sounded under their shoes, the way the trees leaned slightly toward the courtyard as if listening. When they arrived, Hale was already there, standing beside the board, speaking quietly with a man Annie did not recognize. The man was older, gray at the temples, his posture relaxed in a way that suggested comfort rather than confidence. He wore no jacket, just a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Hale turned when he saw Annie. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir," Annie replied. "This is Thomas," Hale said. "A friend of mine." Thomas smiled at Annie. "You must be the young woman I've been hearing about." Annie shifted, unsure how to respond. "She's not here to perform," Hale said evenly. Thomas raised his hands in surrender. "Of course not." Annie watched the exchange carefully. She noticed something she had not noticed before. Hale's tone. It was protective, not loud, not dramatic, just firm. "Do you want to play today?" Hale asked her. Annie nodded. "Yes." "Good," he said. "Thomas will watch." Quietly, Thomas nodded. "I can do quiet." They began. From the first move, Annie sensed something was different. Hale played with a new restraint, one that felt intentional rather than cautious. He was not testing her now. He was listening. Each move came with a pause, not to calculate, but to consider. Annie responded in kind. The board filled with familiar shapes, but the feeling was new. Annie felt less afraid of being wrong. When she hesitated, she allowed herself the time to understand why. When she made a move she was unsure about, she did not rush to apologize. "You're taking space," Hale observed. Annie nodded. "I need it." "That's reasonable," he replied. Thomas leaned slightly closer, his eyes following the pieces. "She's not playing like a child," he said quietly. "No," Hale said. "She never has. Thank you for watching, or see you have decided." The comment warmed Annie and frightened her at the same time. Being seen was good. Being seen clearly felt dangerous. Midway through the game, Annie made a move that surprised even herself. It was not perfect. It was bold. Hale noticed immediately. "Why that?" he asked. Annie stared at the board. "I wanted to see what would happen," she said. "If I didn't protect everything." Hale studied the position, then nodded. "That's how people learn to trust themselves." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You're teaching now?" Hale did not look at him. "I'm learning." The game tightened. Annie felt the pressure build again. But this time it did not frighten her. It focused her. She began to see further ahead, not because she tried to, but because the patterns unfolded naturally. Hale made a small mistake. Annie saw it immediately. She froze. The old instinct rose up fast. Don't correct, don't expose, don't embarrass. She felt it in her chest. tightening, urging silence. She looked up at Hale, then at her mother standing nearby. Hale noticed her hesitation. "What is it?" he asked. Annie swallowed. You left something open." Hale leaned forward. "Show me." She pointed, carefully, not touching the piece. Hale followed her line. His eyes widened just slightly. "You're right," he said. Thomas let out a low whistle. "That would have cost you." Hale nodded. "It would have." Annie waited for the moment to turn sharp. It did not. Hale adjusted his position and continued. "Thank you," he said. The words landed softly but changed something fundamental. Annie felt it like a door opening. They played on. The game grew complex, then resolved slowly into an ending neither had planned but both recognized. This time, Annie pressed harder. Not out of ambition, but clarity. Hale responded with precision. They reached a position where only patience remained. Thomas leaned back, folding his arms. "You don't play to dominate," he said to Annie. "You play to understand." Annie nodded. "If I understand, I don't panic." Hale smiled faintly. The game ended in a draw again, but it felt different from the last. Not equal, balanced. When they stood, Hale extended his hand to Annie. She took it without hesitation. "Well played," he said. "Thank you," she replied. Thomas cleared his throat. "You realize," he said to Hale, "that you're sitting across from something rare." Hale nodded. "Yes, and you're doing what with it?" Thomas asked. Hale looked at Annie, then at her mother. "Making sure it doesn't get crushed." Annie's mother inhaled sharply. She did not speak, but her eyes shone. As Annie gathered herself to leave, Hale spoke again. "Next week," he said, "I'd like to show you something." Annie paused. "What?" "Games played by people who came before you," Hale said. "Not so you can copy them. So you can see where you're different." Annie considered that. "Okay," she said, "as long as I don't have to be like them." Hale smiled. "I wouldn't want that." As she and her mother walked away, Annie felt something settle into place inside her. Not certainty, not pride. Something steadier, belonging. Hale remained by the board, watching the pieces catch the light. Thomas stood beside him in silence for a moment. "You know," Thomas said finally, "this will change things." Hale nodded. "It already has." He looked down at the board once more, at the quiet geometry of it, and felt something he had not expected when this all began. Responsibility. By the time the fifth Saturday arrived, Annie understood that something important was changing. She could feel it in the way her mother moved through the house that morning, lighter, less careful, as if the walls themselves were listening differently. The extra money had helped. Yes, groceries were bought without counting every dollar. The rent envelope no longer sat untouched on the counter like a quiet threat. But it was more than that. It was the sense that someone, somewhere, had decided they mattered. Annie did not have words for it. She just felt steadier. When they reached the estate, Hale was not in the courtyard. Instead, a staff member led them inside, through halls Annie had only glimpsed in passing. The house was quieter here, insulated from echoes and laughter, from the performative energy of the weekends. They stopped outside a small room with a wide table and a single window. Hale stood inside, arranging books. He looked up when they entered. "Good," he said. "You're on time." Annie stepped forward cautiously. The room smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish. The table was covered with chessboards, notebooks, and stacks of books with worn spines. Not decorations, tools. "What is this?" Annie asked. "A library," Hale replied. "And a workspace." Her mother stiffened slightly. "Sir, you're welcome to stay," Hale said immediately. "Both of you. Is one." That mattered. Annie walked closer, eyes scanning the books. Some were thick, heavy with diagrams. Others were thinner, pages marked with handwritten notes. Hale pulled one out and placed it in front of her. "This," he said, "is a game played over 100 years ago." Annie looked down at the board printed on the page. The pieces were arranged in a way she had never seen before. It intrigued her immediately. "Who won?" she asked. Hale smiled. "That's the wrong question." Annie frowned. "Then what's the right one?" "Why did it end the way it did?" Hale replied. They sat, not across from each other this time, but beside one another, the board between them. Hale moved slowly, replaying the game one move at a time. Annie followed, her finger hovering over the page, tracing lines she sensed more than understood. This player, Hale said, was brilliant, but he was impatient. Annie nodded. He moves like he's scared of waiting. Hale looked at her, surprised. Exactly. Dine, they continued. The game unfolded like a story, choices compounding, consequences stacking quietly. Annie asked questions. Hale answered some and let others sit unanswered. What would you do here? Hale asked at one point. Annie studied the position. I wouldn't do what he did, she said. Why not? Because he wanted to finish too badly, she replied. He stopped listening. Hale leaned back slightly. That, he said, is something most people never learn. As Annie felt a small warmth bloom in her chest. Not pride, recognition. They moved through 2 more games that morning. Not playing, but studying. Annie absorbed them hungrily, not memorizing moves, but understanding intentions. Hale watched her closely, noticing the way she leaned in when something clicked, the way she grew still when something troubled her. At one point, she closed the book gently. Can I ask something? She said. Of course, Hale replied. Why are you showing me this? The question was simple, honest. It deserved the same in return. Hale considered it carefully. Because, he said, talent without context is dangerous. People will tell you what you are before you understand it yourself. Annie thought about that. Will they tell me wrong things? Yes, Hale said. Often. Her mother shifted slightly in her chair but remained silent. I don't want to be wrong, Annie said quietly. You will be, Hale replied, but not because of this. She nodded slowly. Will I have to play in front of people again? Annie asked. Hale shook his head. Not unless you choose to. That's good, she said. I think I play worse when people want something from me. Hale smiled. So do most adults. They took a break then. Hale poured water into glasses, offered Annie a small plate of fruit. She ate thoughtfully, her mind still half on the board. Do you like teaching? She asked suddenly. Hale paused. I didn't know I did, he said. Until recently. She smiled at that. When they returned to the table, Hale slid a notebook toward her. The pages were blank. This is yours, he said. If you want it. Annie touched the cover gently. For what? For writing down things you notice, Hale replied. Not moves, thoughts. She opened it carefully, as if it might disappear if handled too roughly. What if they're wrong? Hale met her eyes. Then we learned something. The words settled into her, deep and steady. They spent the rest of the morning in quiet focus. No audience, no pressure, just attention. When it was time to leave, Annie gathered the notebook, and one book Hale insisted she borrow. Her mother thanked him softly, emotion thick in her voice. At the door, Annie turned back. Mr. Hale? Yes? Do you think I'm strange? The question caught him off guard. He crouched slightly so they were closer to eye level. No, he said. I think you're early. She smiled, wide and unguarded. As they walked away, Hale stood in the doorway watching them go. He felt the familiar pull of control, of ambition, of shaping outcomes. But alongside it now lived something heavier, something that demanded restraint. He had opened a door, and once opened, it would be his responsibility to make sure it did not quietly close behind her. The 6th Saturday arrived with rain. It fell steadily. Not hard enough to announce itself, but persistent enough to soften the edges of everything it touched. The courtyard lay empty, the chessboard covered, the stone chairs damp and unused. Annie noticed this immediately when she arrived with her mother, a quiet disappointment settling in her chest. We won't be outside today, her mother said gently. Annie nodded, though she had hoped otherwise. The board felt different outdoors, bigger somehow, but she followed her mother inside without complaint, wiping her shoes carefully on the mat, just as she always did. Hale was waiting near the study. He had not dressed for guests. No jacket, no watch, just a simple sweater and dark slacks, his sleeves pushed up slightly, as if he had already been working. Good morning, he said. Good morning, sir, Annie replied. I thought, Hale continued, that today we might talk. Annie frowned slightly. About chess? About you, he said. And chess. And what happens when the two start to overlap? They entered the study. The room was warm. The sound of rain tapping gently against the window. A single board sat on the table, already arranged not in the middle of a game, but at the beginning. Annie climbed onto the chair, resting her hands on her knees. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything, Hale said as he sat across from her. Not games, not improvement, not gratitude. I could sighed. Annie looked up, confused. I don't. I know, Hale replied. But people will try to make you feel that way. She considered this. Like when people clap? Yes, Hale said. Exactly like that. Annie nodded slowly. He gestured to the board. Let's play, he said. But this time, I want you to talk. She blinked. Talk? Tell me what you're thinking, Hale said. Not everything. Just what you notice. Annie hesitated. Talking while playing felt strange. Dangerous, even. Chess was where she went to think without explaining herself. But she nodded. Okay, she said. They began. Hale opened conservatively, almost gently. Annie responded in kind. After a few moves, she paused. I'm trying not to block myself, she said. Hale nodded. Why? Because when I block myself, I feel safe, Annie said. But then I can't go anywhere. Hale absorbed that quietly. They continued. A few moves later, Annie frowned again. I don't like this, she said. What don't you like? Hale asked. The way the pieces are crowded, she replied. It feels like everyone's waiting for permission. Hale smiled faintly. And who gives permission? Annie looked at him. You, she said. Hale raised an eyebrow. On the board? She shook her head slowly. No. The rain pressed more firmly against the windows now. Hale made his next move deliberately, opening space, inviting complexity. Annie noticed immediately. You're making it harder, she said. Yes, Hale replied. Why do you think that is? She studied the board. Because if it's easy, I don't have to choose. Hale leaned back slightly. And choosing is scary, Annie said. But also mine. They played on. The game unfolded differently than their others. Slower, heavier. Each move felt like a sentence spoken carefully, aware it could not be taken back. Annie spoke more now, halting at first, then with growing confidence. I think this piece wants to leave, she said at one point. Why? Hale asked. It's done what it can here, she replied. If it stays, it's just in the way. Hale nodded. People do that too. She looked up at him. Stay in the way? Yes, Hubat replied. Out of fear, or habit. She thought about that as she moved the piece. Midway through the game, Annie stopped speaking altogether. Hale noticed but did not interrupt. Her face had grown serious, her attention inward. He waited. After a long silence, she spoke again. Do you think people get angry when someone like me is good at something? The question was quiet, but it carried weight. Hale did not answer right away. Yes, he said finally. Some do. Why? Annie asked. Because it forces them to see things they'd rather ignore, Hale replied. About you, and about themselves. Annie nodded, as if she had expected the answer. Will they be angry at you too? She asked. Hale smiled, but there was no humor in it. Some already are. She studied his face. Does that bother you? He considered. It used to, he said. Now it tells me I'm paying attention to the right things. Annie returned her gaze to the board. The game reached a complicated middle position. Annie saw a tactic sharp, promising, but it required risk. She hovered her hand over the piece, then pulled back. Hale noticed. What stopped you? He asked. I don't want to ruin it, she said. Ruin what? Everything, Annie replied. If I'm wrong, Hale leaned forward. Annie, he said. Do you know what certainty looks like from the outside? She shook her head. It looks like arrogance, he said. And it's often wrong. She frowned. Then how do you know when to move? You don't, Hale said. You decide what you're willing to lose. Annie looked at the board again. She inhaled slowly. Then she made the move. It was not perfect. Hale saw that immediately, but it was brave, honest. The game tilted sharply, forcing both of them to respond with care. "Well done," Hale said. Annie's eyes widened. "Even if it's wrong?" "Especially if it's wrong," he replied. They played the rest of the game in thoughtful silence. It ended not in a win or a draw, but in a position where both recognized continuation would teach them little more. Hale extended his hand. Annie shook it, her grip small but firm. "I feel tired," she said. "That's normal," Hale replied. Thinking honestly is exhausting. Her mother appeared at the door then, umbrella in hand. "It's time," she said gently. Annie gathered her things, then hesitated. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes? If I get better," she said. "Will things get harder?" Hale met her gaze steadily. "Yes," he said. "But you won't be alone." She nodded, satisfied. As they left, Hale remained seated for a while, listening to the rain. He looked at the board, at the place where Annie had chosen risk over safety. He realized something then. This was no longer about chess. It was about preparing a child for a world that would not be fair, and teaching her to see clearly anyway. The 7th Saturday arrived with company. Annie sensed it the moment she stepped into the house. The air felt different, denser, edged with voices that did not belong to staff or routine. She heard laughter echo down the hall, sharper and louder than usual, and the low murmur of men who expected to be heard. She slowed instinctively, fingers tightening around the strap of her small bag. Her mother noticed. "It's all right," she said softly. "Stay close." They reached the courtyard entrance and saw them. 3 men standing near the board, jackets off, drinks already in hand. They were not strangers to Hale's house. They carried themselves like people who belonged everywhere they went. Hale stood with them, his posture relaxed but alert. When he saw Annie, he straightened slightly. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir," Annie replied. One of the men glanced down at her, curious. "This her?" he asked. Hale did not answer immediately. He stepped slightly forward, a subtle shift that placed him between Annie and the others. "Yes," he said. "This is Annie." The man smiled, indulgent. "The chess kid." Annie's stomach tightened. Hale's voice remained even. "She's a person," he said, "who plays chess." The smile faltered, just slightly. Hale turned to Annie. "We can play later," he said quietly. "Or not at all. It's your choice." Annie looked at the board, then at the men, then at her mother. "I want to play," she said. Hale nodded once. "All right." They sat. The men gathered closer, not crowding but watching openly now. Annie felt their attention like weight on her shoulders. She placed her hands in her lap and took a slow breath, just as Hale had taught her. "White or black?" Hale asked. "Black," Annie said. The opening began. Hale played normally, deliberately avoiding anything flashy. Annie responded carefully, but she felt the difference immediately. This was not the quiet of learning. This was the quiet of evaluation. "She's good," one man said after a few moves. "Kids memorize fast," another replied. Annie did not look up. She focused on the board, on the shapes that calmed her when the world grew loud. Still, the voices slipped in. Hale noticed. "Gentlemen," he said without looking away from the board. "If you're going to comment, do it later." The men fell silent, surprised. Annie glanced up at Hale, then back down. The game deepened. Annie made a strong positional move. One of the men let out a low whistle. "That's not memorized," he said. Hale's lips pressed together. "No," he said. "It isn't." Annie felt the pressure rise again, sharper than before. This time, it was not fear of losing. It was fear of being turned into something she did not choose. Midway through the game, Hale made a deliberate mistake, not a blunder. A subtle inaccuracy. Annie saw it instantly. Her heart began to pound. This was different. Correcting him now would not be quiet. It would be public. It would invite reactions she could not control. She hesitated. Hale noticed her pause. He looked up, meeting her eyes briefly. There was no command there. No instruction. Only permission. Annie took a breath. She made the move. The board shifted decisively. One of the men straightened. "Did you see that?" Another leaned closer. She just turned the whole position. Hale studied the board carefully, then nodded. Yes, he said. She did. Annie's hands trembled slightly now. She folded them together, anchoring herself. The men began to speak again, voices overlapping. How old did you say she was? Does she compete? You training her, Hale? Hale raised his hand. She's not an investment, he said. She's not a project. And she's not for sale. The words cut through the noise cleanly. Silence followed. Annie looked at him, startled. The game continued. Hale played precisely now. No longer testing, no longer guiding. He was responding honestly. Annie matched him, the board narrowing toward clarity. She felt herself slip into that familiar calm, the one that existed only when she trusted what she saw. The end came quietly. Hale extended his hand. Well played, he said. Annie shook it. One of the men exhaled slowly. You realize, he said to Hale, that people will want to know about her. Hale nodded. I do. We find in the commerce of Crosser. And I'll decide who gets to ask, Hale replied. The men exchanged glances. The atmosphere had changed. What had begun as curiosity now carried respect and something else. Calculation. Annie stood, suddenly tired. Her mother stepped forward immediately, placing a hand on her shoulder. We should go, she said. Hale agreed. Yes. As Annie turned to leave, one of the men spoke again, more softly this time. You're special, he said to her. Annie paused. She turned back, looking at him carefully. I'm just me, she said. Hale felt something settle in his chest when he heard it. After they left, the men lingered. You're opening a door, one said. Yes, Hale replied. You won't be able to control what comes through. Hale looked at the empty board, then toward the hall where Annie had disappeared. I'm not trying to control it, he said. I'm trying to guard it. The men fell quiet. Later, alone in the courtyard, Hale replayed the moment Annie had hesitated, then chosen to move anyway. He understood now what the next danger would be, not losing her confidence, but watching others try to claim it. Power attracted attention, and attention, he knew, was never neutral. The 8th Saturday did not belong to the board. It belonged to the aftermath. Annie felt it before anyone said a word. The house moved differently now. Staff glanced at her a second longer than before, then looked away. Conversations lowered when she passed. It was not hostility, it was awareness. And awareness, Annie was learning, could be heavier than judgment. She stayed close to her mother as they walked through the halls. Did I do something wrong? Annie asked quietly. Her mother squeezed her hand. No, baby, she said. You just did something people don't know how to place. They reached the small study instead of the courtyard. Hale stood by the window, phone in hand, his expression tight but controlled. When he saw them, he set the phone down. Good morning, he said. Good morning, sir, Annie replied. Hale studied her face for a moment. How are you feeling? Annie considered the question carefully. Like I talked too loud without meaning to. It is 9, Hale nodded. That's a good way to describe it. They sat. No board today, no pieces, just 3 chairs and the quiet hum of the house. I want to tell you something before we do anything else, Hale said. People have started asking questions. Annie's shoulders tensed. About me? Yes, Hale said. About how you play. Where you learned. What you might become. Her mother's jaw tightened. We didn't ask for that. I know, Hale said. That's the problem. When created, Annie looked down at her shoes. I don't want to be on display. You won't be, Hale said firmly. Not unless you choose to. She looked up at him then, searching his face for certainty. She found it. There are people, Hale continued, who see ability and immediately think of ownership. They ask how to train it, shape it, profit from it. Annie frowned. Like when people want to tell you how to play. Yes, Hale said. But louder. She thought about that. I don't like that. 18 Akko. Neither do I, Hale replied. He leaned forward slightly. So here's what we're going to do. Annie listened closely. For now, Hale said, we slow everything down. No new faces. No spectators. No stories. Her mother exhaled, relief evident. And you, Hale said, turning back to Annie. You decide what chess means to you before anyone else tries to decide it for you. Annie nodded. Okay, do you want to keep playing? Hale asked. Yes, Annie said immediately. Do you want to compete? He asked. Annie hesitated. I don't know. That's the right answer, Hale said. He stood and crossed the room, pulling a small box from a shelf. He placed it on the table and opened it. Inside was a simple wooden chess set, worn smooth with use. This was my father's, Hale said. He taught me how to play. Annie looked at the pieces with reverence. Did he make you play? Hale smiled faintly. No, he made me think. He slid the box toward her. I want you to take this home. Annie's eyes widened. I can't. You can, Hale said. And you should. Her mother started to protest, but Hale raised a hand gently. This isn't a gift, he said. It's a tool, and tools belong with the person who uses them. Annie reached out, touching one of the pieces lightly, as if it might vanish. Thank you, she said softly. They did not play that day. Instead, they talked. About school, about what Annie liked to read, about the way teachers spoke when they were surprised by her answers, about how often adults mistook quiet for absence. You don't owe anyone entertainment, Hale told her. And you don't owe anyone access. Annie nodded slowly. Sometimes I feel like if I don't explain myself, people get mad. That's true, Hale said. But that's not your responsibility. She absorbed that in silence. Later, as they prepared to leave, Annie stopped at the door. Mr. Sect. Hale? Yes. Are you going to stop playing chess with me? She asked. Hale shook his head. No, even if it gets complicated? Especially then, he said. She smiled, small and relieved. After they left, Hale returned to the study and picked up his phone again. He scrolled through messages he had ignored all morning. Invitations, inquiries, offers disguised as concern. He deleted them all. Some doors, he knew, had to remain closed long enough for the person behind them to grow strong on their own terms. And some guardianship did not look like protection. It looked like restraint. The 9th Saturday arrived without warning. No rain, no guests, no unusual tension in the halls. That, Annie would later realize, was what made it dangerous. When change came quietly, it was harder to see where it began. She noticed it first in Hale. He was waiting for them in the study again. But this time he was not relaxed. Papers lay spread across the table where the chessboard usually sat. Notebooks, a tablet. His jacket was on, his posture sharper, his attention divided. Good morning, Annie said. Good morning, Hale replied, though his eyes lingered on the screen a second longer than before he set it aside. Annie sat anyway, placing the wooden chess set beside her chair. She had brought it every week since he'd given it to her, not because she needed it, but because it reminded her that the game belonged to her now, not just to the house. Hale noticed the box. Have you been playing?
Yes,
He asked. Yes, Annie said. At night. I ready. With whom? Myself, she replied.
Myself.
Sometimes my mom watches. Hale nodded, distracted. Good. They set up the board, but the rhythm was off. Annie felt it immediately. Hale moved quickly, too quickly, as if trying to get somewhere else without leaving the table. She responded carefully, adjusting, waiting. After several moves, she paused. You're not listening, she said. Hale blinked, surprised. What? You're moving like you already decided something, Annie explained, before the board answers. Hale leaned back, exhaling slowly. That's fair, he said. I'm distracted today. Why? Annie asked. He hesitated. Because people are impatient, she nodded, understanding more than he expected. They want you to hurry, she said. Yes, Hale replied. They want to know what you'll become, Annie frowned. I don't know that yet. Neither do I, Hale said. But they don't like that answer. They continued playing, but the game no longer flowed. Hale corrected himself mid-thought. Annie noticed gaps she usually didn't see. The board felt crowded again, not with pieces, but with expectations. Midway through, Hale stopped. Let's pause, he said. Annie froze. Did I do something wrong? No, Hale said immediately. You did something right. She looked at him, confused. You noticed something I was trying to ignore, he said. And that means it's time we talk about the next part. Annie's chest tightened. What next part? Hale folded his hands on the table. Opportunities. The word felt heavy in the room. There are schools, Hale continued, programs, coaches, people who specialize in helping children like you. Annie's fingers curled into the edge of the chair. Like competitions? Yes, Hale said. Eventually, she swallowed. With crowds? Likely, he replied. She stared at the board. The pieces blurred slightly. I don't want to be loud, Annie said. I just want to be good. Hale nodded. I know. And I don't want my mom to feel like she has to say yes, Annie added, just because someone important asked. Her voice was steady, but Hale heard the fear beneath it. You're not wrong, he said quietly. And that's why we haven't said yes to anything. Annie looked up. You said no? Yes, Hale replied. To all of them. For now. Relief washed through her, followed immediately by guilt. But you look worried, she said. Hale smiled faintly. Because saying no is easy once. It gets harder the longer you keep doing it. Why? Annie asked. Because people start to believe they deserve an explanation, he said. And explanations invite arguments. She considered that. Then don't explain. Hale laughed softly, surprised. You make it sound simple. It is, Annie said. You either listen to the board or you don't. The truth of it settled between them. They resumed the game, slower now, more honest. Hale played with renewed attention. Annie felt the balance return, piece by piece. The board opened again. Breathing, she made a daring move, sacrificing a small advantage for long-term control. Hale noticed immediately. You're thinking further ahead, he said. Annie nodded. Because I don't feel rushed. The game ended quietly, neither win nor draw, but a mutual recognition that the lesson had been learned. As they packed up, Hale spoke again. There will come a time, he said, when protecting you by saying no will start to limit you. Annie listened. And there will come a time when saying yes will be its own kind of danger. He continued. When that happens, the choice has to be yours. She nodded slowly. Not yours? Not mine, Hale confirmed. Not anyone's but yours. Her mother, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. We appreciate what you've done, she said quietly, but we won't let anyone take her childhood. Hale met her gaze. Neither will I. Annie hugged the chess box to her chest. I don't need to decide yet, she said. No, Hale agreed. You don't. As they left that day, Annie felt heavier, but also stronger. The world beyond the board was starting to lean toward her. Curious, hungry. She did not know how to face it yet, but she knew this. She would not rush. Hale remained alone in the study after they left, staring at the empty board. For the first time, he felt the true weight of the role he had taken on. Not patron, not sponsor, guardian of time. The 10th Saturday arrived with a letter. It sat on the kitchen table between the salt shaker and a folded grocery receipt. Its envelope heavier than it should have been. Annie noticed it immediately, not because of the return address she didn't know what it meant, but because her mother had not opened it yet. Her mother did not leave letters unopened. What is it? Annie asked. Her mother glanced at it, then away. Something we didn't ask for, she said. Annie nodded. That made sense. They walked to the estate in near silence. Annie carried the wooden chess box as she always did. But today, it felt heavier in her hands. The world felt closer somehow, as if it were leaning in to hear her next move. Hale was waiting in the study, standing instead of sitting. When he saw the envelope in Annie's mother's hand, his expression tightened, not with surprise, but recognition. It came today? He asked. Her mother nodded. This morning, Hale gestured for them to sit. Annie climbed into the chair, swinging her legs once before stilling them. She sensed that this was not a chess day, even though the board rested nearby. Hale did not reach for the letter. He did not ask to read it. Before we open that, he said, I want to say something clearly. Annie looked up at him, alert. No matter what's inside, Hale continued. Nothing changes unless you want it to. Annie nodded. Her mother exhaled softly. The envelope was opened carefully, as if it might break. Her mother read silently, lips tightening, then loosening again. She passed it to Hale without a word. Hale read it once, then again. "They want her to test," he said, privately. "For now." Annie's chest tightened. "Test? For what?" "Placement," Hale replied. "Scholarships, training, a fast track." Annie frowned. "Fast where?" Hale looked at her steadily. "Away." The word landed quietly, but it echoed. Her mother sat straighter. "She's 6, she said. "Yes," Hale agreed. "That's part of the appeal." Annie felt heat rise behind her eyes, not tears, but something sharper. "I don't want to leave," she said quickly. "I like it here." "I know," Hale replied. "They say it's opportunity," her mother added. "They always say that." Hale nodded. "Opportunity is a word people use when they want you to forget the cost." Annie looked between them. "Do I have to decide now?" "No," Hale said firmly. "And anyone who says you do is lying." Silence settled over the room. Hale pushed the letter aside. "Let's play," he said. Annie blinked. "Really?" "Yes," he said, "because when things get loud, the board helps us hear what matters." They set up. From the first move, Annie felt the difference. Her hands shook slightly. The patterns that usually calmed her felt distant, like a language she suddenly feared she might lose. Hale noticed. "You don't have to be good today," he said. "You just have to be honest." Annie swallowed and nodded. The opening was hesitant. She second-guessed herself, pulled pieces back that should have advanced. Hale did not correct her. He waited. "I keep thinking about what they'll want," Annie said quietly. "Who?" Hale asked. "The people in the letter," she replied. "What if they don't like how I play?" Hale moved a piece gently. "Then they don't," he said. "That doesn't make you wrong. But what if they're important?" Annie asked. Hale met her eyes. "Important to whom?" She frowned, thinking. "Not every door needs to be opened," Hale continued. "Some exist to teach you that you can walk past them." The game deepened. Annie began to settle, her breathing slowing. She saw a familiar pattern emerge and followed it, then another. The board began to feel like itself again. She made a strong move. Hale smiled. "There you are." She smiled back, briefly. Halfway through the game, Annie stopped. "If I say no," she said, "will people be mad?" "Yes," Hale replied. "Will they punish my mom?" Hale's expression hardened. "No one gets to do that," he said. "Not while I'm here." Annie studied him. "Why are you helping me?" The question hung between them. Hale did not answer right away. "Because," he said finally, "when I was young, I was praised for being fast and loud, and no one taught me how to be careful with myself." Annie considered that. "Did it hurt?" "Yes," Hale said. "Eventually, the game moved toward an endgame." Annie played with more confidence now, choosing clarity over flash. Hale followed, guiding without leading. They reached a position where Annie had a clear advantage, but only if she pushed. She hesitated. "If I win," she said, "it feels like I'm proving something." Hale nodded. "Then don't win for them." She looked at the board again. "I want to win for me." "Then do," Hale said. Annie made the move. The board shifted decisively. Hale saw it immediately and tipped his king with a soft click. "Well done," he said. Annie did not smile right away. She sat with it, letting the feeling settle. "I don't want to test yet," she said finally. "I want to learn more first." Her mother's eyes filled with relief. "We'll tell them that," she said. Hale nodded. "I will." Annie looked up. "What if they don't listen?" Hale stood. "Then they'll learn something too." As they prepared to leave, Annie paused at the door. "Mr. 1, Halle? Yes? Will there be more letters?" "Yes," he said honestly. She nodded. "Okay." That night, after they were gone, Hale sat alone in the study. The unopened future spread across his desk in envelopes and messages he would not answer yet. He understood now what the next test would be. Not whether Annie could play, but whether the world could wait. The 11th Saturday did not come with a letter. That, Annie would later understand, was the sign. The house felt too quiet when she arrived. Not the calm she had grown used to, but a watchful stillness, as if something had decided to wait instead of announce itself. Her mother sensed it too. She moved more slowly, her hand lingering on Annie's shoulder longer than usual. Hale met them at the door himself. "You're early," he said. "So are you," Annie replied. He smiled faintly, then stepped aside to let them in. "We won't be using the study today," he said. "There's something I want you to see." They followed him down a corridor Annie had never walked before, past rooms that felt older, heavier, as if they carried memories instead of furniture. At the end was a small office with no windows, just shelves and a single desk. The air smelled like paper and dust. On the desk lay a thin folder. Hale did not sit. Neither did Annie. "These are not offers," he said. "They're summaries." Annie frowned. "Of what?" "Of people like you," Hale replied. Her chest tightened. "Like me, how?" "Unusual," he said. "Gifted. Difficult to categorize." Annie did not like the word difficult. It had followed her in school more than once. Hale opened the folder and slid a page toward her. She could not read all of it, but she recognized words she had heard whispered before. Exceptional, accelerated, underutilized. "They study children," Hale said. "Not to understand them, to predict them." Annie looked up. "Like chess?" "Yes," Hale replied, but without asking permission. Her mother stiffened. "Why are you showing us this?" "Because," Hale said, "this is what happens when decisions are made without the person at the center of them." Annie stared at the paper, then pushed it away. "I don't want to be predicted," she said quietly. "I want to be surprised. I want to be surprised." Hale nodded. "So do I." With a defecate to 90 wizened applies, he closed the folder. "They're not wrong about your ability," he continued. "But they are wrong about the timeline." Annie tilted her head. "What timeline?" "The one where children are allowed to be children," Hale said. Silence settled around them. Hale reached into a drawer and pulled out a photograph. He placed it on the desk between them. It showed a boy, no older than 10, seated at a chessboard far too large for him. Adults loomed behind him, smiling for a camera. "That was me," Hale said. Annie's eyes widened. "You?" "Yes," he replied. "I won that tournament. They said I was a prodigy." "What happened?" Annie asked. Hale exhaled slowly. "I learned to perform," he said, "and I forgot how to listen." The words sat heavy in the small room. "They took the quiet out of it," he continued. "And once that was gone, I never got it back." Annie studied the photograph. "You look scared," she said. Hale nodded. "I was. Eyes." She pushed the photo gently back toward him. "I don't want that. You won't have it," Hale said firmly. "Not if I have anything to say about it. But you said you wouldn't decide for me," Annie said. He smiled slightly. "I won't decide where you go," he said, "but I can decide who gets to push." Her mother placed a hand over Annie's. "We'll protect her," she said. "I know," Hale replied. "But protection isn't enough anymore." Annie looked up. "What do you mean?" "It means," Hale said carefully, "that people will stop asking soon. They'll start assuming." Annie felt a chill run through her. "Then what do we do?" Hale looked at her for a long moment. "We make your voice louder than their expectations," he said, "without making you small." Annie frowned. "How?" "By choosing one thing," Hale replied. "On your terms." Her mother inhaled sharply. "What kind of thing?" "A public refusal," Hale said. "Clear, calm, documented. Too." Annie blinked. "You want me to say no?" "Yes," Hale said. Out loud. Once. Annie's heart began to race. "What if they don't like it?" "They won't," Hale replied. "That's the point." She thought about the board, about hesitation, about choosing what she was willing to lose. "What would I say no to?" she asked. Hale leaned forward slightly. "A showcase," he said. "An exhibition match they're arranging. They want you to play an adult. Film it. Package it." Annie's stomach twisted. "Like before," Yes, Hale said, but louder. She closed her eyes for a moment. If she said no, she might lose chances she didn't understand yet. If she said yes, she might lose something she already had. I don't want to be someone's story, Annie said finally. I want my own. Hale nodded. Then we say no. Her mother squeezed her hand. Are you sure? She asked gently. Annie nodded. Yes. Hale straightened. Then I'll make the call. He did not do it in front of her. He stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind him. Annie sat very still. What if this changes everything? She whispered. Her mother knelt in front of her. It will, she said. But not all change is loss. Minutes passed. Annie counted her breaths. When Hale returned, his expression was unreadable. It's done, he said. Annie searched his face. What happened? They were unhappy, Hale replied. They reminded me of what you were turning down. And? Annie asked. And I reminded them, Hale said, that they don't get to decide what she's worth. Her chest loosened. They won't stop, her mother said quietly. No, Hale agreed. But they'll slow down. Annie stood. Her legs felt weak, but her spine felt straight. I feel strange, she said. Like I did something big without moving. Hale smiled. That's power, he said. Used correctly. As they left that day, Annie carried no board, no books, just herself. Hale remained behind, staring at the closed folder on the desk. He understood now what the final lesson would be. Not how to teach a child to win, but how to teach the world to wait. The 12th Saturday arrived without ceremony. No letters, no visitors, no tension humming beneath the walls. Annie noticed it immediately. The absence of pressure felt almost unfamiliar, like stepping into a room where a noise had just stopped and your ears needed time to adjust. She held her mother's hand as they walked, but her grip was looser now, her stride more confident. When they reached the estate, Hale was waiting in the courtyard. The chessboard stood in the center, uncovered, pieces already arranged not at the beginning of a game, but in a simple mid-position, balanced, open, honest. Good morning, Hale said. Good morning, Annie replied. They sat without speaking. For a long moment, neither reached for a piece. I've been thinking, Annie said finally. Hale nodded. So have I. She looked at the board. I don't think I want to play today. Hale did not react. He only waited. I want to understand something instead, Annie continued. About what happens next. All right, Hale said. What do you want to understand? Does it ever stop? She asked. People wanting things from you? Hale considered the question carefully. No, he said. But you get better at knowing which voices matter. Annie nodded. I think I can hear that now. Her mother watched them quietly from a nearby chair, pride and worry living side by side in her expression. Annie leaned forward and picked up a pawn, rolling it gently between her fingers. I thought saying no would make everything louder, she said. But it didn't. Hale smiled faintly. That's because no is a complete sentence. It doesn't invite arguments unless you add more words. She set the pawn back down carefully. I like that. They sat in silence again. The morning sun crept across the courtyard stones, warming the air. Somewhere inside the house, a door closed softly. Life continued, unremarkable and steady. I'm not done learning, Annie said. No, Hale agreed. You're just beginning. But I don't want to rush, she added. And I don't want to be someone people point at. Hale met her gaze. Then don't be. She frowned slightly. Is it really that simple? He smiled, not unkindly. Simple isn't the same as easy. Annie accepted that. She stood suddenly and walked around the table, studying the board from different angles. This position, she said, pointing. It's not winning or losing. No, Hale said. It's alive. I like alive, Annie said. She looked up at him. Can I change the board? Hale nodded. Of course. Annie reached out and moved a single piece, not dramatically, not cleverly, just enough to alter the balance. Hale studied it. Interesting. It doesn't finish anything, Annie said. It just makes more room. Hale leaned back, something like relief settling into him. Yes, he said. Exactly. They did not play after that. Instead, Hale told Annie about his father, how he had loved the quiet parts of the game more than the victories, how he had taught Hale to sit with uncertainty even when the world demanded certainty. Annie listened, absorbing the story not as instruction, but as context. When Hale finished, Annie asked, "Do you miss him?" "Yes," Hale said simply. She nodded. "I think missing means you learned something good." Relics. Hale felt the truth of that settled deeply. As the morning wore on, Annie stood beside her mother, ready to leave. She hesitated, then turned back. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes, I don't know what I'll be yet," she said. "But I don't feel scared anymore." Hale smiled, truly this time. "Then you're exactly where you should be." She stepped forward and did something she had never done before. She hugged him. Briefly. Firmly. Hale froze for half a second, then returned it with care. When Annie and her mother walked away, Hale remained in the courtyard, alone with the board. He looked at the pieces one last time, then began to pack them away, not to end something, but to mark it complete. Some lessons did not need repetition. Weeks later, a small article would appear in a local paper. No names, no photos, just a quiet story about a child who had declined an opportunity most people would chase, and an adult who had supported that choice. It would not go viral. It would not change the world, but it would matter. Years from now, Annie would sit at many boards, some public, some private. She would win some games. She would lose others. She would choose when to be seen and when to remain quiet. And when the world grew loud, when expectation pressed too close, she would remember this place, the board that listened, the man who waited, and the moment she learned that power did not come from being discovered. It came from choosing when to step forward and when to let the world wait. This story reminds us that true talent does not need to shout to be real, and dignity does not come from being seen, but from being respected. In a world that rushes to label, exploit, and profit from ability, especially when it comes from those society underestimates, the greatest act of justice is restraint. The lesson is not that genius must be discovered, but that it must be protected. Protected from ego, from greed, from expectations that arrive before understanding. Power, the story teaches, is not winning loudly or early. It is choosing when to speak, when to say no, and when to grow in silence until the voice belongs fully to the one who carries it. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.